Reality screamed. Not the gentle fabric of space-time bending under the weight of an infinity stone or the controlled rupture of a sorcerer's portal. This was the sound of two universes colliding, of metaphysical laws refusing to reconcile, of a being who should not exist here, forcing his way through the bleeding wound between dimensions. Above New York City, the sky itself seemed to peel back like burned parchment, revealing something beyond, a roiling golden maelstrom of psychic energy so vast that every telepath on Earth clutched their heads in sudden, overwhelming agony. The Emperor of Mankind fell from that impossible tier, a figure wreathed in lightning that was not lightning, fire that was not fire, but the raw expression of a will that had shaped the destiny of 1,000,000 worlds. He crashed into Central Park with the force of a meteorite, and the impact crater glowed with residual energy that made Geiger counters shriek and mystical wards across 3 continents flare into sudden, desperate life. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the figure rose. He stood nearly 9 feet tall, armored in gold and crimson, his face a mask of perfect, terrible beauty. Eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations swept across this new world, and in that gaze was the weight of 40 millennia. The Emperor's consciousness expanded outward, psychic senses probing this strange universe, and he felt wrongness. The warp was absent. The Astronomicon, his great lighthouse that guided humanity across the stars, was gone. Terra, holy Terra, did not exist here. He was alone, truly alone, for the first time in 10,000 years. But the Master of Mankind had not survived the war in heaven, the age of strife, and the Horus heresy by succumbing to despair. His mind reached out, not with the familiar currents of the warp, but with raw psychic force that bent this reality's own strange energies to his will. He sensed life. Billions of humans, but also something else. Enhanced beings, mutants, gods walking among mortals, cosmic entities watching from beyond the veil. This universe was young, chaotic, undisciplined, and somewhere in the darkness of this new cosmos, he felt something ancient stir and take notice of his arrival. The Emperor's hand moved to the sword at his side, a weapon that had ended demons and shattered the weapons of gods. Around him, the trees of Central Park had been flattened in a perfect circle, and the earth itself bore scorch marks in patterns that would drive mortal minds to madness if studied too long. He needed information. He needed to understand this place, its powers, its factions, its threats. The imperial truth, his philosophy of reason, science, and human supremacy over superstition, would need to be adapted here. But first, he needed allies, or at least, he needed to know who would stand in his way. Above, the dimensional tear was already sealing, reality's immune system desperately trying to close the wound. But the damage was done. Every enhanced being on the planet had felt that psychic shockwave. Every magical practitioner had sensed the wrongness. Every spy satellite had recorded the golden lightning that preceded the impact. They would come. Heroes, villains, those who called themselves gods. Let them come. The Emperor of Mankind had conquered a galaxy once. He would not be imprisoned, studied, or controlled by the powers of this world. If they offered alliance, he would consider it. If they offered subjugation, he would remind them why his enemies called him the Anathema. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The golden figure began to walk, each step purposeful, toward the lights of the city. His psychic presence rolled before him like an invisible wave, and those sensitive enough to feel it found themselves filled with an inexplicable mixture of hope and terror. Something had arrived in their world. Something ancient and powerful and utterly convinced of its own righteousness. New York was about to meet the man who had once been worshipped as a god by trillions, and who had spent 10,000 years rejecting that worship while sitting upon a golden throne, holding back the forces of chaos through sheer indomitable will. That throne was gone now, the shackles removed, the Emperor was free, and this universe had no idea what that meant. The Triskelions' threat assessment systems achieved something they had never done before. They crashed from sheer data overload. Nick Fury stood in the SHIELD command center, his single eye fixed on the holographic display that was frantically trying to classify the entity that had just torn its way into their reality. Energy readings spiked off every known scale. The psychic resonance had triggered every psi dampener from New York to Washington. Most worryingly, 3 separate orbital weapons platforms had independently targeted the crater and then immediately stood down, their AI systems registering something their programming classified as Allied Command Presence. They hadn't been hacked. They had been convinced. "Talk to me, Hill," Fury growled. Maria Hill's fingers danced across her interface, her face pale. "Sir, we've got simultaneous responses from every major player. Avengers Tower is on full alert. Stark's already launched a suit. Thor left Midgard 30 seconds after impact, heading for Asgard at maximum speed. Doctor Strange's sanctum just sealed itself with wards we didn't even know existed. Xavier's school went into lockdown. Wakanda closed its borders. And the bad guys? Hydra cells are mobilizing worldwide. The Hand is evacuating New York. AIM and MODOK have gone completely dark. It's like..." She paused, struggling for words. "It's like everyone just simultaneously decided this was above their pay grade." Fury's jaw tightened. In his decades of dealing with enhanced individuals, alien invasions, and cosmic threats, he'd learned to trust his instincts. And right now, every instinct was screaming that whatever had just arrived was fundamentally different from anything they'd encountered before. "Get me a visual." The hologram shifted, showing satellite footage of Central Park. The figure was walking through the devastation he'd created, and even from orbit, there was something profoundly wrong about how he moved. Too purposeful, too aware, like a predator who knew exactly where every potential threat was positioned and had already calculated 17 ways to neutralize them. "Enhanced?" Hill asked. "That's the question, isn't it?" Fury pulled up another screen, this one showing the psychic signature analysis. "Our telepath consultants are useless. Half of them passed out from the initial pulse. The other half are babbling about golden light and the Emperor's will. Whatever this is, it's not a mutant. It's not an Asgardian. It's not from any known alien species in our database. Interdimensional? Has to be. That tear in reality wasn't natural, and it wasn't technology. Something forced its way through." He pulled up another feed, this one from the RAF's maximum security wing. "And our cosmic-level prisoners are terrified. The purple man, who's never shown fear in his life, is catatonic. It's like something in their hindbrain is telling them a bigger predator just entered the ecosystem." Maria leaned closer to the screen. The figure had stopped, head tilted slightly, as if listening to something. Then he turned, looking directly at the satellite camera. Even through kilometers of atmosphere and electronic mediation, both SHIELD agents felt the weight of that gaze. "He knows we're watching," Hill whispered. "Of course he does." Fury's hand moved to his communicator. "Get me the Avengers. Now." But before Hill could respond, every screen in the command center flickered and died. Then they came back online, showing a single image. A golden aquila, a two-headed eagle with wings spread, overlaid with text in a language that shouldn't exist, but that everyone in the room could somehow read. "I am not your enemy, yet." The message vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by normal feeds. But the implication was clear. Whoever this being was, He had just casually bypassed every security protocol S.H.I.E.L.D. possessed and delivered a message directly into their most secure facility. Fury allowed himself a rare curse. "Hill, I want options. If this thing decides we are enemies, I need to know if we can stop it." "Sir, based on the energy readings alone, I don't think we can. The initial impact released more force than a tactical nuke, and there's no radiation, no fallout, just psychic energy that our instruments can barely measure. If this entity is hostile, then we're already dead, and we just don't know it yet." Fury straightened. "Which means we play this smart. No aggressive moves until we understand what we're dealing with. But we prepare for the worst." Across the city in Avengers Tower, Tony Stark was reaching similar conclusions as his AI ran analysis after analysis on the crater's energy signature. In Kamar-Taj, the Ancient One opened eyes she had kept closed for 3 days, having foreseen this moment but not understood its full implications. In Asgard, Odin rose from his throne for the first time in months, calling for Heimdall to report on what the all-seeing gatekeeper had witnessed. And in Westchester, Charles Xavier sat in his cerebro chamber, hands trembling, as he replayed the single moment of psychic contact he'd achieved before his mind had been gently but firmly pushed away. In that instant, he had touched a consciousness so vast, so ancient, so utterly convinced of its purpose that it made his own lifetime of telepathic experience feel like a child's first steps. The voice had been neither cruel nor kind, simply absolute. "I have walked among humanity since before your civilizations learned to forge bronze. I have guided the species from the shadows, protecting it from threats you cannot imagine. I am the Emperor of mankind, and I will speak with your leaders, your heroes, and your gods, not as a supplicant, as an equal." Xavier had immediately severed the connection, his hands shaking. Because in that brief contact, he had glimpsed something that terrified him. The Emperor believed every word. This was not delusion or megalomania. This being had genuinely shaped the destiny of an entire species across 40,000 years. And now he was here, in their universe, with plans they couldn't begin to fathom. The Mark 47 armor screamed through the sky over Manhattan, its systems working overtime to track the entity that was systematically making its way towards Stark Tower. Tony Stark's fingers flew across holographic interfaces as Jarvis fed him data at a rate that would have overwhelmed any normal human pilot. "Okay, Jay, what am I looking at here?" "Something unprecedented, sir." The AI's British accent carried an undertone of what Tony would almost call concern if he didn't know better. "The entity's energy signature is consistent with nothing in our databases. It's psychic in nature, but the power levels exceed anything recorded from known telepaths by several orders of magnitude. Comparative analysis suggests—" "I know what it suggests," Tony interrupted, watching the golden figure move through the streets below. People were giving him a wide berth, not from conscious recognition of danger, but from some deeper instinct. "It suggests we're dealing with something that makes Thor look like a party trick, which is exactly why I'm going down there before someone does something stupid, like firing on it. Sir, I feel compelled to point out that your armor's SI shielding is rated for mutant-level telepathy at best. If this entity decides to, then I'll have about 3 seconds to regret my life choices. Wouldn't be the first time." Tony angled downward, positioning himself to intercept the Emperor's path. "But here's the thing. Whatever this guy is, he sent a message to S.H.I.E.L.D. saying he's not our enemy yet. That yet is doing a lot of heavy lifting, but it also means he's open to negotiation. And negotiation is what I do. You're thinking of Afghanistan, aren't you? I'm thinking that sometimes the most dangerous situations require someone to walk up and start a conversation." Tony brought the armor down in a controlled landing 50 meters ahead of the Emperor, repulsors charged but not aimed. Record everything. If this goes sideways, someone needs to know what we learned." The Emperor stopped, and for the first time since arriving, he smiled. It was not a comforting expression. Tony's faceplate retracted, because if he was doing this, he was doing it as Tony Stark, not Iron Man. He spread his arms in a gesture that was carefully neutral. "So, hell of an entrance. I'm Tony Stark. You might have heard of me, except you probably haven't because you're clearly not from around here. Which, given that I've met aliens, gods, and a talking raccoon, is saying something." The Emperor regarded him with eyes that seemed to look through flesh and metal to the man beneath. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that resonated in the chest, the bones, the base of the skull. "Anthony Edward Stark, futurist, philanthropist, bearer of an artificial heart that keeps you alive, haunted by weapons you created, seeking redemption through heroism. You mask fear with humor and genuine intelligence with performed arrogance." Tony's smile didn't waver, but his pulse quickened. "Okay, so you're psychic. That's invasive, but noted. You want to tell me who you are, or should I just keep calling you Golden Giant in my head? I am the Emperor of mankind. I have walked your species' path since before recorded history. In my reality, I guided humanity from the age of terror through the dark age of technology, through the age of strife, and into the stars. I have seen the birth of your kind's potential and the depth of its corruption." "My reality," Tony repeated. "So you're from another dimension. That tracks with the whole tearing a hole in space-time thing. And you're here because I did not choose to come here. Forces beyond even my control cast me through the veil between universes." The Emperor's expression shifted, something almost like curiosity entering his eyes. "But I find myself intrigued by this place. Your Earth has achieved remarkable things without the guidance I provided in my own timeline. You have individuals of extraordinary power who have not yet descended into the tyranny or chaos that such power inevitably breeds. You have heroes." "Damn right we do." Tony's repulsors powered down slightly. "And that's exactly why I'm here, to figure out if you're going to be one of them or if you're going to be a problem. I am neither hero nor villain by your limited definitions." The Emperor took a step forward, and Tony forced himself not to flinch. "I am pragmatist. I do what must be done to ensure humanity's survival. In my universe, that meant brutal choices, necessary evils, the creation of warriors designed for conquest, the suppression of religion and superstition, the unification of mankind under a single vision. Yeah, that sounds like fascism with extra steps. And your democracy has achieved what, precisely?" The Emperor's voice didn't rise, but the air itself seemed to press down. "I see a world divided. Enhanced beings fighting in the streets while governments debate legislation. Gods playing at mortality while threats from beyond your comprehension gather in the darkness. You have power without purpose, freedom without unity. It is admirable in its idealism. But idealism does not stop extinction-level threats." Tony's jaw set. "We've faced those threats. Chitauri invasion, Ultron. We're still here. Because you were fortunate. Because your enemies were overconfident or underprepared. But I have fought wars that lasted centuries. I have seen civilizations fall when fortune turned against them." The Emperor's gaze softened minutely. "I do not seek to conquer your world, Anthony Stark. I seek to understand it, to learn if there is another path than the one I was forced to walk." That threw Tony off balance. "You're saying you don't have all the answers? That's unexpectedly humble for someone calling themselves an emperor." "I called myself nothing. My sons gave me that title. My people made me a god despite my explicit commands otherwise. I am a being of vast power and knowledge, but I am not omniscient. The Emperor looked past Tony toward the skyline. In my universe, I made choices that saved humanity from annihilation. But those choices also led to civil war, to my imprisonment upon a golden throne, to 10,000 years of stagnation and suffering. Perhaps here I might learn if there was another way, if there still is. Tony studied the Emperor for a long moment, every instinct honed by years of dealing with gods, monsters, and megalomaniacs was trying to get a read on this being. And what scared him most was that the Emperor seemed genuine. Okay, Tony said finally, let's say I believe you're not here to start the Fourth Reich, Space Edition. What exactly do you want? Dialogue with your leaders, your heroes, those you call gods. I would understand this universe's power structure before I decide where I fit within it, or if I fit at all. That's surprisingly reasonable. Tony's HUD was showing Jarvis's analysis. No hostile intent detected, stress patterns consistent with honest communication. I can arrange a meeting, but fair warning. The people you're going to meet have dealt with their share of cosmic entities, and they're not going to just take your word that you're a good guy. I would expect nothing less. Suspicion is wisdom when dealing with the unknown. The Emperor extended a gauntleted hand. Will you serve as my introduction to this world's defenders, Anthony Stark? Tony looked at the offered hand, then at the data streaming across his HUD, then at the golden figure who claimed to be humanity's ancient guardian. Every tactical program was screaming warnings, but sometimes you had to trust your gut. He reached out and shook the Emperor's hand. The psychic presence that touched his mind was carefully controlled, but Tony felt its depth, an ocean pressed into a teacup. Welcome to Earth, Tony said. Try not to start any holy wars while you're here. The Emperor's smile returned. I make no promises. The Bifrost opened above the Triskelion with a roar of rainbow light and thunder that sent every shield agent scrambling for defensive positions. Thor, god of thunder, stepped from the dimensional bridge with Mjolnir crackling in his grip and an expression that promised violence. Where is the pretender? Nick Fury, who had been coordinating with Tony Stark's approach, closed his eye and counted to 3. Stand down, Point Break. We have the situation under control. Under control? Thor's voice shook the windows. I felt his arrival in Asgard, Director Fury. The entire realm shook with the psychic resonance. Heimdall, whose gaze spans the cosmos, reports that he sees this being and yet does not, as if his very presence distorts reality around him. My father has named him a threat of the highest order. Your father also classified Banner as an extinction event, and we worked that out, Fury replied, pulling up the live feed of Tony's conversation with the Emperor. Stark's making contact now. So far, it's been civil. Thor strode to the screen, watching as the Man of Iron and the golden figure stood in apparent negotiation. His grip on Mjolnir tightened. Civil does not mean safe. I have heard my father speak of beings who could smile while ending worlds. This Emperor, he resonates with power that rivals the Allfather himself. Perhaps exceeds it, which is exactly why we're not shooting first and asking questions later. Fury gestured to Hill, who pulled up additional screens showing readings from the encounter. Whatever he is, he's not acting hostile. Hasn't attacked anyone, hasn't made threats. And according to our psychic consultants who aren't catatonic, his mental signature doesn't match any known hostile entity. Absence of hostility is not proof of benevolence. But Thor's aggression was tempered by curiosity now. He leaned closer to the screen, studying the Emperor's stance, his bearing. There is something. He carries himself as a warrior, not one who plays at war, but one who has known centuries of it. And see there, his armor is not for ceremony. Those are marks of genuine battle, weapons designed to kill, not to intimidate. Great, Fury muttered. Another warrior god, just what we needed. Mock not, Director. If this being is truly what he claims, a protector of humanity across millennia, then he and I may have more in common than you realize. Thor straightened. I would speak with him, as one who has defended mortal realms to another. Maybe wait until Stark finishes his conversation. But Thor was already summoning the Bifrost. The man of iron can hold his own for the moments it takes me to arrive. If this Emperor is genuine, he will not take offense at another warrior's interest. If he is false, lightning crackled around Mjolnir, then Asgard will have its answer. The Rainbow Bridge descended, and Thor was gone before Fury could countermand the order. Why do I even bother? Fury asked no one in particular. In Central Park, the Emperor's head tilted slightly. Another arrives, one of the divine beings native to this reality. Tony's faceplate snapped back up. That would be Thor. Norse god, surprisingly good guy, absolutely terrible at subtle entrances. Let me do the talking, okay? He gets a little smitey when he thinks Earth is threatened. The Bifrost opened 20 meters away, and Thor strode forward with his hammer held ready but not raised. His eyes, glowing with barely contained lightning, fixed on the Emperor with an intensity that had made frost giants flee in terror. I am Thor Odinson, Prince of Asgard, Protector of Midgard. You will explain yourself, stranger, and you will do so now. The Emperor met Thor's gaze without flinching. For a moment, something passed between them, a recognition that transcended words. Two beings of immense power and age, taking each other's measure. I am the Emperor of mankind, from a reality not your own. I did not come here by choice, but by catastrophe. I mean no harm to this world or its people. So says every conqueror before the first blow is struck. Thor took a step forward. I have felt your power, false Emperor. It is vast, perhaps great enough to rival even the mightiest of Asgard. But power alone does not grant righteousness. By what right do you walk among mortals bearing such strength? By what authority do you claim dominion over humanity? I claim no dominion here. The Emperor's voice remained calm, but something shifted in his bearing. I am not here to rule Asgardian. I am here because forces beyond my control cast me into this reality. But do not mistake my peaceful words for weakness. I have faced gods before. I have ended them when they threatened my people. The air between them crackled with potential violence. Tony's repulsors powered up. Okay, let's all just take a breath here. Nobody needs to start a pissing contest in the middle of Manhattan. But Thor's eyes had narrowed. You speak of ending gods, yet you claim to protect humanity. These statements seem contradictory, Emperor. Only to those who believe gods are necessary. The Emperor's presence expanded, psychic energy rolling outward in a wave that made Thor grip Mjolnir tighter. In my reality, I watched as humanity worshipped beings who fed upon their faith, who demanded sacrifice and subservience. I watched as gods, entities born of the warp, of humanity's own psychic potential turned toxic, corrupted entire civilizations. So I taught humanity the imperial truth, that there are no gods, only beings of great power, and power can be challenged. Heresy, Thor breathed, but there was something other than anger in his voice now. Uncertainty. Is it? Or is it the simple recognition that divinity is a label, not a fundamental truth? The Emperor took a step forward, and now he and Thor stood almost eye to eye, though the Emperor's greater height gave him a slight advantage. You call yourself a god, Asgardian, but you bleed. You can be killed. You were born, which means you will die. These are not the properties of true divinity. You are an enhanced being from a long-lived species with advanced technology that primitive humans mistook for magic. Admirable, certainly. Worthy of respect, perhaps, but not worship. You dare! Thor raised Mjolnir, and lightning began to arc between the clouds above. I dare state observable fact. The Emperor's hand moved to his sword hilt. If you attack me, Prince of Asgard, I will defend myself, and you will learn that I have fought beings far more powerful than you and emerged victorious. But I would prefer not to begin my time in this universe by killing one of its defenders. Tony jumped between them, hands raised, repulsors fully charged. Okay, stop. Both of you. Thor, put the hammer down. Your Majesty, hand off the sword. We are not doing this. For a heartbeat, neither being moved. The tension stretched so tight that reality itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Then the Emperor slowly, deliberately, removed his hand from his weapon. The Armored One is correct. Violence serves neither of our purposes. He looked at Thor with something approaching respect. You are no false god playing at power, Asgardian. You are a warrior who has earned your strength. I acknowledge this. But do not presume that your strength exceeds mine, or that your protection of humanity gives you authority over me. Thor studied the Emperor for a long moment. Then, with visible effort, he lowered Mjolnir. You are right. I do not know you well enough to judge your threat. But know this, Emperor. I have watched over Midgard for over 1,000 years. I have seen would-be conquerors and dark gods rise and fall. If you prove false, if you bring harm to this realm or its people, I will stand against you with all of Asgard's might. A threat I take with appropriate seriousness. The Emperor inclined his head fractionally, but unnecessary. As I told Anthony Stark, I am not here to conquer. I am here to learn if there is another path. In my reality, I made choices that saved humanity from annihilation, but cost us our souls. Perhaps in this place, with heroes like yourself, there is wisdom I have not yet discovered. The admission clearly surprised Thor. His aggressive posture eased slightly. You seek knowledge, not dominion. I have had dominion. It is an empty throne. Something ancient and weary entered the Emperor's voice. I have spent 10,000 years imprisoned, holding back the darkness while my Imperium devolved into the very superstition and tyranny I sought to prevent. If I must remain in this reality, I would prefer not to repeat those mistakes. Tony and Thor exchanged glances. This was not what either of them had expected. Okay, Tony said slowly. So you're saying you want to… what? Join the team? Start a book club? Learn how we do things here? I am saying I would observe before I act, understand before I judge. Your universe has achieved a balance mine never could. Power without absolute tyranny, heroes without worship, freedom without complete chaos. I would understand how. The Emperor looked between them, and in exchange I offer my knowledge, my power, and my experience. When threats arise, and they will, you will find me a valuable ally. Thor stroked his beard, considering. Finally he spoke. In Asgard we have a saying. Judge a warrior not by his words in peace, but by his deeds in war. I propose a test, Emperor. You claim to be humanity's protector. Then protect them. Not as their ruler, but as their shield. Prove through action that your words are genuine. A trial by fire. The Emperor's smile returned. I accept. When crisis comes, and in this universe, I sense it comes often, I will stand with your heroes. And you will see what the Emperor of Mankind can do when unbound. Tony's HUD was going crazy with notifications, S.H.I.E.L.D. demanding updates, the Avengers mobilizing, mystical alarms from the Sanctum Sanctorum. But for now, the immediate crisis seemed to have passed. They hadn't started a war with an interdimensional God King. Yet, the psychic scream was silent to normal ears, but to Charles Xavier, it felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane. He sat in his cerebro chamber, hands pressed to his temples, trying to filter through the overwhelming presence that had settled over New York like a golden shroud. Every telepath in his school was experiencing similar difficulties. Some had locked themselves in their rooms, others had fled to the lower levels where the psychic dampeners were strongest. Joan Grey stood outside the chamber, her own considerable powers barely managing to shield the younger students from the Emperor's ambient presence. "Professor," Jean's voice came through the intercom, tight with strain. "SHIELD is requesting we assist with the situation. They want to know if we can establish communication." "Tell them," Xavier said carefully, each word measured, "that I have already tried, and that attempting to force contact would be inadvisable." The memory of that initial touch still burned in his mind. He had reached out telepathically as soon as he'd sensed the Emperor's arrival, expecting resistance or shielding like he'd encountered with other powerful minds. Instead, he'd found something incomprehensible, a consciousness that extended across 40 millennia, containing the memories and experiences of thousands of lifetimes. It was like trying to telepathically contact an ocean and having the ocean look back. The Emperor had not attacked his mind. That was the terrifying part. He had simply noticed Xavier's presence, acknowledged it with the same attention one might give a curious insect, and then gently but firmly closed the connection. The dismissal had been absolute. Now Xavier was trying a different approach. Not telepathy, but something subtler. An invitation, broadcast on the psychic frequencies he knew the Emperor could perceive. A request for dialogue between equals, though Xavier harbored no illusions about the accuracy of that term. For long minutes there was no response. Then, between one heartbeat and the next, the Emperor was there, not physically, but his consciousness manifested in the cerebro chamber with such solidity that Xavier could see him standing there in golden armor, eyes fixed on the aging telepath with clinical interest. "Charles Francis Xavier," the Emperor said, his voice resonating through psychic space. "Founder of the X-Men, champion of mutant rights, one of Earth's most powerful telepaths." A pause. "You wish to speak with me?" Xavier carefully maintained his mental composure. "I do. Your presence is difficult for those of us with telepathic abilities. The students in my care are frightened. I wanted to understand your intentions before that fear turns to panic." "Understandable. Your mutants are an interesting phenomenon. Humanity evolving beyond its baseline parameters through natural selection and genetic drift. In my reality, we called such things abhuman. Most were either exterminated or enslaved." The Emperor's expression was unreadable. "I sense you fear I would advocate similar treatment here." The thought had occurred to me. Xavier's voice remained steady despite the ice forming in his chest. "You speak of humanity's supremacy, yet mutants are human. Evolved, yes, but human nonetheless. Are they?" The Emperor moved closer, and Xavier felt the weight of that ancient gaze. "Or are they the beginning of something new? In my timeline, I carefully guided human evolution, creating warriors and administrators suited to specific purposes. Your mutants are evolution left unchecked, random, chaotic. Some develop powers that could end civilizations, others gain abilities that serve no purpose beyond novelty. And humanity, baseline humanity, fears them for their unpredictability. Because fear leads to hatred, and hatred to violence. I have spent my life trying to build bridges between humans and mutants to prove we can coexist. A noble goal, doomed to failure, but noble." The Emperor's tone wasn't cruel, merely factual. I have seen this pattern repeat across 10,000 years, Charles Xavier. Enhanced humans always come to dominate baseline humans, or baseline humans exterminate the enhanced out of terror. There is no peaceful coexistence, not permanently. Only temporary truces that collapse when resources grow scarce or fear grows strong. Xavier's hands clenched on the arms of his wheelchair. Then you believe my dream is impossible, that everything I've worked for is futile. I believe your dream requires constant maintenance against the entropy of fear and tribalism, which is admirable, but exhausting. The Emperor's expression softened fractionally. In my reality, I removed the problem by making all of humanity enhanced. The Astartes, the Custodians, the Primarchs. I elevated the species beyond its limitations, but in doing so, I created new divisions, new hatreds. My sons fought each other in a civil war that nearly destroyed everything I had built. Then what do you propose? What is your solution? I have none. Not yet. The Emperor met Xavier's eyes, and in that gaze was something surprising. Uncertainty. That is why I wish to observe your approach. You have maintained this school for decades, trained mutants to use their powers responsibly, integrated them into society. By all logic, you should have failed by now. Yet you persist. Either you are an anomaly, or I have been wrong about something fundamental. Xavier leaned forward. You're saying you're willing to learn? To consider that your way might not be the only way? I am saying that I have failed, Charles Xavier. My Imperium is a monument to my failure, a tyrannical theocracy built on the corpse of my dream. If I am to exist in this universe, I would prefer not to repeat those mistakes. The Emperor's presence seemed to expand, filling the chamber. But understand this. If I perceive a genuine threat to humanity's survival, I will act. And my methods are not gentle. I have exterminated entire species that threatened mankind. I have burned worlds rather than let them fall to corruption. Compassion is a luxury afforded only when extinction is not imminent. And who decides when extinction is imminent? You. Who else has the knowledge to recognize such threats? I have fought the ruinous powers, entities of pure malevolence that feed on mortal emotion and turn entire civilizations to madness. I have battled the Rangdan, the Orcs, the ancient machines of the Necrontire. I know what apocalypse looks like from experience, not theory. Xavier was silent for a long moment. Then, you frighten me, Emperor. Not because of your power, but because you are so certain of your righteousness. That certainty is dangerous. It's what turns heroes into tyrants. Perhaps. The Emperor's form began to fade. But uncertainty is what allows threats to fester until they cannot be contained. We shall see which approach serves better in the trials ahead. Guard your students well, Charles Xavier. I sense storms gathering in this universe that will test us all. The presence vanished, and Xavier was alone in Cerebro once more. His hands were shaking. Jean burst through the door immediately. Professor, are you? I'm fine, John. But his voice was hollow. Contact the Avengers. Tell them we need to convene a meeting of everyone with significant power in the hero community. The Emperor is not our enemy, but I'm not certain he's entirely our ally either. We need to decide how to handle this before circumstances force the decision for us. What did he say to you? Xavier looked up at his former student, his eyes haunted. He said he's failed, that his universe fell into tyranny despite his best efforts, and that he's not certain we can avoid the same fate. He paused. But John, the truly terrifying part, I think he's genuinely trying to help. He's just not sure how to do it without breaking us in the process. Outside, across the city, the Emperor continued his walk through Manhattan. But now his mind was elsewhere, reaching out with psychic senses to map this new universe's structure. He touched the edges of the astral plane, similar to the warp, but calmer, more stable. He felt the cosmic entities watching from beyond, the living tribunal, the Watchers, beings of power that reminded him of the Chaos Gods, but fundamentally different in nature. And he felt something else, something dark, gathering at the edges of reality. Multiple threats, each one potentially catastrophic, all converging on this moment, this place, this Earth. The Emperor's expression hardened. He had been truthful with Xavier. He did wish to learn, to find a better path. But he had not lied about his nature either. When the storm came, and it would come, he would do what he had always done. He would protect humanity, by whatever means necessary. The question was whether this universe's heroes would stand with him or against him when that moment arrived. The Hydra facility in Sokovia had been abandoned since the Avengers' assault on Strucker's base, or so S.H.I.E.L.D. believed. In reality, it had simply gone deeper underground, both literally and figuratively. In reinforced bunkers 300 feet below the surface, what remained of Hydra's leadership watched the footage of the Emperor's arrival with a mixture of terror and avarice. Dr. Heinrich Kruger, one of the few remaining Hydra scientists who had worked directly with the Tesseract, replayed the energy readings for the 5th time. Gentlemen, what we're looking at isn't just another enhanced individual. This is a paradigm shift. The power signature alone exceeds anything we've recorded, including Thor during the Battle of New York, which makes him either our greatest threat or our greatest opportunity, said Victor Slade, a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent whose face bore burn scars from the Triskelions' destruction. Hydra has always succeeded by turning our enemies' weapons against them. We used Stark's technology, Zola's genius, the Winter Soldier program. If we could control this Emperor, control him? Kruger's laugh was bitter. Did you see what he did to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s systems? He bypassed quantum encryption like it was a child's lock. The man is a telepath of unprecedented power, possibly precognitive, and judging by his physiology, essentially immortal. You don't control something like that. Then we destroy him. Ophelia Sarkissian, the woman known as Viper, leaned forward. Hydra has resources S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't know about, weapons from the war, technology salvaged from Chitauri wreckage. If this Emperor is a threat to our plans, he's a threat to everyone's plans, interrupted a new voice. The Hydra leaders turned as a figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a business suit whose face was utterly forgettable in its averageness, except for his eyes. Those eyes held a calculating intelligence that had survived the organization's repeated destructions. Baron Zemo, Slade said carefully, we thought you'd gone to ground after Sokovia. I had. I've been watching, waiting. Helmut Zemo moved to the screens, studying the Emperor's image. But this changes everything. This being is not like the Avengers, not like Ultron, not like any threat we've faced. He's a unifying force. Already I've intercepted communications. The Avengers are convening a meeting. Xavier's X-Men are coordinating. Even Wakanda has reached out to S.H.I.E.L.D. This Emperor has done what we've failed to do. Unite our enemies. Then we divide them again, Viper hissed. We've done it before. No. Zemo's voice was flat, final. We don't have time for subtlety. Something else is happening. Multiple anomalies have been detected across the globe in the past 12 hours. Energy signatures that match the Emperor's arrival. Reality breaches. This isn't just about one powerful being anymore. Something is coming through behind him. Kruger pulled up new data, his face paling. Mein Gott, he's right. Look at these readings from our dimensional monitoring stations. The barrier between realities is destabilizing. The Emperor's arrival wasn't just an isolated incident. It was the first crack in a dam that's about to burst. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Then Slade spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "What are you proposing, Zemo?" "I'm proposing that we do what Hydra has always done best. We adapt. We can't defeat the Emperor. We can't control him, but we can use the chaos of his arrival to position ourselves for whatever comes next." Zemo turned to face them. "Hydra survives by being essential, so we make ourselves essential. We offer our resources, our intelligence network, our dimensional monitoring capabilities to the heroes dealing with this crisis." "You want us to help the Avengers?" Viper's voice was incredulous. "I want us to survive, and that means recognizing when we're facing an extinction-level event." Zemo's expression was grim. The Emperor spoke of threats he fought in his reality, entities that feed on mortal emotion, machines that harvest souls, aliens that exist only to wage war. If even a fraction of those things follow him through the breach between universes, then our petty plans for world domination become irrelevant. You can't rule a world that's been consumed by cosmic horrors. Kruger was already typing furiously. The dimensional barriers are weakest at 3 points: Norway, Nepal, and New York. If something is going to come through... The alarms went off before he could finish. Red lights bathed the command center as every sensor they had began screaming warnings. On the screens, reality itself was tearing open above Manhattan, not far from where the Emperor had first arrived. But this tear was different, darker, pulsing with energy that made the monitors flicker and distort. "What is that?" Slade demanded. Zemo's face had gone white. "That," he said quietly, "is why the Emperor warned that he's not our enemy yet. Because we're about to meet something that makes Hydra's ambitions look quaint by comparison." Through the tear, something was beginning to emerge. The sensors couldn't get a clear reading. The entity's presence was scrambling their instruments, but what they could see was enough to send ice through every Hydra agent's veins. It was massive, easily the size of a Leviathan from the Chitauri invasion. But where the Leviathan had been biological, this thing seemed to be made of shifting shadows and crystalline structures that hurt to look at directly. Its form defied consistent geometry, appearing to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could properly process. And it was screaming, not with sound, but with pure psychic force that every living being in a 50-mile radius could feel like needles in their brain. "Kruger," Zemo snapped. "What is it?" The scientist's hands were shaking as he analyzed the data. I don't know. The energy signature is similar to the Emperor's, but inverted somehow, like matter and antimatter. If I had to guess..." He looked up, his eyes wide with fear. "I think it's what the Emperor was fighting when he got pulled into our universe, and it followed him through." On the screens, they watched as the Emperor, still in Manhattan, turned to face the dimensional breach. Even through the digital feed, they could see his expression shift from curiosity to recognition to something that might have been rage. The golden figure raised one hand, and psychic energy began to gather around him like a visible aura. His voice, when it came, was broadcast somehow through the psychic frequencies that every person on Earth could somehow hear in their minds. "Citizens of this world, take shelter now. What emerges from that portal is an enemy of all mankind. I will stand against it, but I cannot guarantee your safety if you remain exposed." Thor was already in motion, Mjolnir crackling with lightning as he launched himself toward the breach. Iron Man's armor screamed through the air, with what looked like the entire Avengers team mobilizing behind him. And in the Hydra bunker, Zemo made a decision. "Slade, get me a secure line to S.H.I.E.L.D. Kruger, transmit everything we have on dimensional anomalies to this frequency." He recited a string of numbers that made Viper's eyes widen. It was Nick Fury's personal encrypted channel. "Viper, activate our emergency assets. Every weapon, every soldier, every resource we have that could possibly help. "You're really doing this?" she asked. "Helping them?" "I'm ensuring Hydra survives." Zemo's jaw set. "And if that means temporarily working with Captain America to stop reality from unraveling, then so be it. Hail Hydra's survival, above all else." Through the monitors, they watched as the creature fully emerged from the breach, its form solidifying into something that should not exist in three-dimensional space. It opened what might have been a mouth, and the psychic scream intensified until blood began to run from the Hydra agent's ears. The Emperor met it head-on, and the collision of their powers sent shockwaves that shattered windows for miles. The true battle for Earth's survival had begun. And for the first time in history, Hydra found itself on the side of the angels, not out of redemption, but out of pure pragmatic terror. The Sanctum Sanctorum had been designed to withstand mystical assaults from across dimensions, to shield against eldritch horrors and dark sorceries that would drive normal humans mad. Dr. Stephen Strange had personally reinforced its wards with knowledge gleaned from the Ancient One herself, integrating protections that had held back invasions from the dark dimension and worse. All of those wards were screaming. Strange stood in the central chamber, hands moving through complex gestures as he wove layer after layer of protective magic around the sanctum. The eye of Agamotto pulsed warm against his chest, responding to the dimensional breach that had torn open over Manhattan. Wong stood at his side, sweat beading on his forehead as he maintained the outer perimeter defenses. "It's not of this universe," Wong said through gritted teeth. "The energy signature is wrong. It's like it exists in a frequency that shouldn't be possible here. Because it shouldn't be." Strange's astral form had already scouted the breach, and what he'd seen had shaken him more than he cared to admit. That creature is following the Emperor's trail. It's something from his reality, drawn through the wound he left when he crossed over. Then the Emperor brought this on us? Not intentionally, but the damage is done. Strange's hands shifted, opening a portal that showed the street-level battle unfolding in Manhattan. The Emperor stood in the center of a crater, golden energy radiating from his form in waves that rippled the air itself. The creature, Wong had called it a warp entity based on Strange's description of the Emperor's universe, was circling him like a predator. Its form shifting between states of matter and immaterial darkness. Thor had arrived, lightning arcing from Mjolnir to strike the creature's crystalline carapace. The bolts connected, shattered part of its form, but the damaged sections regrew almost instantly, pulling matter from the air itself, or perhaps from some other dimension entirely. Iron Man, Captain America, Black Widow, and Hawkeye were evacuating civilians, but the creature's psychic scream was making coordination difficult. Strange could see people stumbling, holding their heads, some collapsing entirely from the mental assault. The Emperor raised both hands and reality bent. Strange felt it through his mystical senses, a manipulation of the fundamental forces that was not magic as he understood it, but something older, more primal. The Emperor's psychic power was reaching into the fabric of space-time itself, using his will to impose order on chaos. A golden barrier erupted around the creature, containing it within a sphere of pure psychic force. The warp entity thrashed against the confinement, its form distorting as it tried to phase through the barrier, but the Emperor's will held firm. "He's trying to banish it," Strange murmured. "Force it back through the breach before it can fully anchor itself to our reality." "Can he do it?" Strange was silent for a moment, his astral senses analyzing the flow of power. "Possibly, but not alone. The creature has already begun to feed on the fear and confusion it's generating. The more chaos it causes, the stronger it becomes. It's like a symbiotic relationship with mortal emotion." Like Dormammu feeds on the dark dimension. Exactly, which means, Strange's eyes widened, we need to cut off its food supply. Wong, I need you to coordinate with Xavier. Get every telepath you can find working to calm the civilian population. If we can reduce the ambient fear and panic, we weaken the creature. Wong nodded and rushed off. Strange, meanwhile, opened a portal directly into the combat zone, stepping through onto the shattered street, 50 meters from where the Emperor battled. The golden figure didn't turn, but his voice resonated in Strange's mind. Sorcerer, you perceive the true nature of this threat. I do. Strange's hands began weaving defensive wards around the perimeter, reinforcing the Emperor's containment field with mystical energy. It's a parasitic entity from your reality. It feeds on emotion, specifically fear and suffering. A demon of the warp, lesser than what I have faced, but still dangerous. The Emperor's concentration didn't waver as he spoke telepathically. In my reality, such beings can possess mortals, corrupt entire planets. If it escapes containment here, it won't. Strange pulled energy from the Earth's ley lines, from the mystical reserves he'd spent years accumulating, pouring it into the containment. But I need to understand how to kill it. In your universe, how do you permanently destroy such entities? You cannot, not truly. They are manifestations of mortal emotion, made manifest in the warp. Kill the body, and they simply retreat to their realm to reform. The Emperor's eyes blazed with golden light. The only permanent solution is to sever their connection to the materium entirely, cut off their anchor to physical reality. The breach. Yes. If we can seal the dimensional wound while the demon is on this side, it will be trapped here, vulnerable. Without access to the warp's infinite energies, it can be destroyed, at least in this universe. Thor landed beside them, Mjolnir crackling. This creature is like the Dark Elves' reality warpers. Magic and lightning harm it, but it regenerates. What is the plan? Strange quickly outlined the strategy. We need to seal the breach, then kill the creature before it can escape back through. But closing a dimensional wound of that size requires massive amounts of mystical and psychic energy focused simultaneously. I can provide the psychic component, the Emperor said, his physical voice overlaying his mental one for the first time. But the mystical aspect is beyond my abilities. The warp and your universe's magic are similar but not identical. I lack the proper framework. Then we work together. Strange met the Emperor's ancient gaze. I'll close the breach. You keep that thing contained until I do. Thor, I need you to... A concussive blast of psychic force interrupted him as the demon threw itself against the barrier with renewed fury. Cracks appeared in the golden containment, reality bleeding through the fractures. The Emperor's expression hardened. It's learning, adapting to my power signature. We have minutes, perhaps less. Strange made a decision. Wong, he called telepathically. I need every sorcerer in the sanctum channeling power to me, now. And tell the Avengers to hit that thing with everything they have the moment the barrier drops. The Emperor glanced at him. You intend to drop the containment deliberately? I intend to bait it. The moment it breaks free and lunges for fresh victims, it'll be fully committed to this reality, fully manifested. That's when we seal the breach with it on this side. Strange's hands began glowing with eldritch energy. Can you hold it for 30 seconds once it's free? The Emperor's smile was sharp and utterly without warmth. Sorcerer, I held back 4 chaos gods simultaneously for 10,000 years while seated upon a throne. I can manage 30 seconds against a lesser demon while standing and armed. Good, because if this doesn't work, then this universe will face the first of many incursions from the warp. The breach is widening. "Stephen Strange, more will come. This is merely the vanguard." The Emperor's power surged, golden light pouring from his form. "Which is why we must succeed, not just for this battle, but to send a message to the ruinous powers. This reality is defended." Strange felt the power flowing to him from Wong and the other sorcerers, felt the ley lines responding to his call, felt the eye of Agamotto growing warm as its temporal energies awakened. Around them, the Avengers were taking position, Iron Man's repulsors charging, Thor calling down lightning from darkening clouds. Even Hulk had arrived and was roaring his challenge at the contained demon. The Emperor looked at Strange one last time. "On your mark, master of the mystic arts." Strange took a breath, centered himself, and nodded. "Now." The golden barrier shattered like glass. The demon lunged forward with a shriek that shattered windows and drove civilians to their knees. But it had barely moved 3 meters when the Emperor was there, his power-wreathed fist connecting with the creature's crystalline skull with force that sent shockwaves rippling through the street. Thor's lightning struck from above. Iron Man's repulsors fired in concentrated bursts. Hawkeye's explosive arrows detonated against the creature's flanks. The combined assault drove it back, confused, wounded, but still anchored to reality. Strange began the incantation. The words were older than human civilization, taught to him by the Ancient One, who had learned them from entities that predated written language. His hands moved through gestures that bent space-time, that called upon forces older than gods, that commanded reality itself to heal its wound. The breach began to close. The demon felt it, understood suddenly that it was being trapped, and turned its full fury toward Strange. It charged, massive and terrible, and moving faster than something that size had any right to move. The Emperor intercepted it. What happened next would be analyzed by SHIELD scientists for years, replayed on footage from a dozen angles, and still never fully understood. The Emperor's form seemed to grow, or perhaps he was pulling power from dimensions beyond the merely physical. His psychic presence expanded to fill the street, and when he struck the demon, it wasn't just physical force, it was a conceptual attack, a denial of the creature's right to exist. The demon screamed, thrashed, tried to retreat through the closing breach. But Strange's spell was complete. The dimensional wound sealed with a flash of light that temporarily blinded every camera pointed at it. When vision cleared, the breach was gone, and the demon, trapped on Earth without its connection to the warp, suddenly became killable. It lasted another 7 seconds. The Emperor's sword, drawn from some dimensional pocket, carved through the creature's form with golden fire. Thor's lightning struck its core. Tony's unibeam punched through what passed for its chest cavity. And with a final diminishing wail, the demon collapsed into itself, its form dissipating like smoke in a high wind. Silence fell over Manhattan, broken only by the sound of debris settling and distant sirens. Strange lowered his hands, exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow. The Emperor stood in the center of the devastation, his armor scorched but intact, his sword still burning with golden fire. Their eyes met across the ruined street. "Well fought, sorcerer," the Emperor said. "You too." Strange allowed himself a tired smile. "Though I think we need to have a serious conversation about what other things might try to follow you through from your universe." The Emperor's expression grew grim. "More will come. That was merely a lesser demon, drawn by the psychic signature of my arrival. Greater threats will sense the breach eventually, even sealed as it is. The barrier between our universes has been permanently weakened. Then we'll strengthen it, together." Strange stepped forward, extending his hand. "Dr. Stephen Strange, Sorcerer Supreme and Master of the Mystic Arts, I think it's time we had a formal alliance. Emperor." The Emperor regarded the offered hand, then clasped it firmly. Agreed. You have proven yourself a capable defender of humanity, Stephen Strange. I would stand with you against what is to come." Around them, the other Avengers were approaching cautiously. This battle had been won, but everyone present understood the implications. The Emperor's arrival had not been a singular event. It was the first crack in a dam holding back horrors from another universe. And the dam was breaking. The Avengers Tower conference room had hosted strategy sessions against alien invasions, artificial intelligence uprisings, and gods bent on conquest. But the gathering that assembled 48 hours after the demon attack was unprecedented in both scope and gravity. Tony Stark stood at the head of the table, his arc reactor glowing steady in his chest. To his right sat Steve Rogers, freshly returned from a mission in Eastern Europe. To his left, Bruce Banner adjusted his glasses nervously. Thor stood by the windows, arms crossed, while Natasha and Clint occupied chairs near the exit, old habits from SHIELD training. But it was the others in the room that made this meeting historic. Doctor Strange had portaled in from the sanctum, Wong standing behind him. Charles Xavier's wheelchair sat at the table's far end, with Jean Grey and Scott Summers flanking him. Nick Fury occupied a chair in the corner, his single eye missing nothing. T'Challa, King of Wakanda, had come personally rather than sending a representative, and his presence spoke volumes about how seriously Wakanda was taking the situation. And at the center of it all, standing rather than sitting because no chair in the room would accommodate his size, was the Emperor of Mankind. "Let's get one thing straight right from the start," Tony began, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're not here to debate whether the Emperor is a threat. He just helped us kill an interdimensional demon that would have eaten half of Manhattan. We're here to figure out what happens next." "What happens next is preparation," the Emperor said, his voice resonating in the acoustically designed room. "That demon was merely the first. The breach I created when I was pulled into your universe has permanently weakened the barrier between realities. More entities will attempt to cross over, drawn by the psychic signature of my presence." "And you couldn't have led with that information?" Steve's voice carried an edge of frustration. "We had less than 10 minutes warning before that thing manifested." "Because I did not know the barrier would be so fragile here." The Emperor's gaze was steady. "In my universe, the warp and the materium are in constant flux. Demonic incursions are commonplace. I assumed your reality would be more resilient. I was wrong." "So you made a mistake." T'Challa's voice was measured, kingly. "The question is, what will you do to rectify it?" The Emperor inclined his head slightly, an acknowledgement of the Wakandan king's authority. "I will work with your sorcerers and scientists to reinforce the dimensional barriers. I will teach you to recognize the signs of warp contamination, and when the next incursion occurs, I will stand with your defenders to repel it." "That's assuming we trust you," Scott Summers said, his hand unconsciously moving toward his visor. "You've been here less than 3 days, and you've already brought an invasion." "An invasion I helped stop," the Emperor replied. "But your suspicion is warranted. Trust must be earned, not demanded." Charles Xavier spoke up, his voice calm and diplomatic. "Perhaps we should focus on what we know rather than what we fear. Doctor Strange, you worked directly with the Emperor during the battle. What is your assessment?" Strange stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "The Emperor is not from our universe, that much is certain. His power operates on principles that are similar to magic, but fundamentally different. He manipulates psychic energy with a level of control I've never encountered. Not from Xavier, not from Jean Grey, not from any telepath on Earth. And his knowledge of interdimensional threats is extensive. In other words, he's telling the truth about his origin," Bruce said quietly. "As far as I can determine, yes." Strange met the Emperor's eyes. "But that doesn't mean he's not dangerous. He is, profoundly so. The question is whether that danger is directed at us or at the things that threaten us. Both. Potentially, the Emperor said with brutal honesty. I have stated my purpose clearly. I protect humanity, but my methods are not gentle. In my reality, I have committed genocide against species that threatened mankind. I have sanctioned the destruction of worlds to prevent corruption from spreading. I have created warrior slaves to fight my wars. If you work with me, you must understand that I will do what is necessary, not what is comfortable. The room fell silent. Then Fury spoke from his corner. We've dealt with necessary evils before. S.H.I.E.L.D. was built on them. But here's the thing. We also learned that unchecked power, even with good intentions, leads to tyranny. So how do we know you won't decide humanity needs your particular brand of protection, whether we want it or not? The Emperor turned to face Fury directly. You do not know. You cannot know. I could lie and tell you I will respect your sovereignty, your freedom, your right to self-determination. But the truth is simpler and more complex. I will act according to my judgment of the threat level. If a minor incursion occurs, I will defer to your heroes. If an existential threat manifests, I will do whatever is required to stop it, regardless of your permission. That's refreshingly honest, Tony said dryly. Terrifying, but honest. I have learned that lies and manipulation breed the very corruption I fight against. The Emperor's expression was unreadable. My own sons fell to chaos, partly because I did not trust them with the truth. I will not repeat that mistake. Thor pushed off from the window. You speak of your sons, warriors you created, in Asgard. We would call such beings Einherjar, chosen warriors bound to a lord's service. Were they slaves or soldiers? Both. Neither. The Emperor's voice carried weight of ancient regret. They were my greatest achievement and my greatest failure. I created 20 Primarchs, genetically engineered generals designed to lead humanity's conquest of the stars. They were my sons in all but the biological sense. I loved them, and half of them betrayed me, led astray by the Chaos God's whispers. Because you created them as tools, Xavier said softly. Beings with consciousness and emotion, but designed to serve your purpose. Did you ever ask them what they wanted? The Emperor's silence was answer enough. Jean Grey leaned forward. Professor Xavier and I have both touched your mind, Emperor. We've seen fragments of your memories. The war you described, the Horus Heresy, it nearly destroyed you, didn't it? Not just physically, but the betrayal itself. It did. For the first time, something approaching vulnerability entered the Emperor's voice. I created beings capable of greatness and gave them the tools for conquest, but I did not give them purpose beyond war. When the Great Crusade was complete, when all of humanity was united under the Imperium, my sons had nothing left but their weapons and their pride. The Chaos Gods exploited that void. And now you're here, Steve said, in a universe where you can't make those same mistakes again, because we won't let you. The Emperor looked at Captain America, and something like respect flickered in his ancient eyes. You are correct, Stephen Rogers. In this universe, I am not the unquestioned master of humanity's destiny. I am merely another being of power among many. It is uncomfortable, but perhaps necessary. So where does that leave us? T'Challa asked. You say more incursions will come. What do we need to prepare for? The Emperor gestured and psychic energy formed into images in the air, representations of creatures from his universe. Lesser demons like the one we fought, warp entities that feed on emotion. In the worst case, the attention of the Chaos Gods themselves, beings of such power that they can corrupt planets with their mere presence. Or worse, the Tyranids, an extra-galactic swarm that consumes all biological matter. The Necrons, ancient machines that harvest souls. The Orcs, a species that exists only for war and grows stronger the more you fight them. Jesus, Clint muttered. And I thought Ultron was bad. Your Ultron was a child playing with matches compared to these threats. The Emperor's images dissipated. But we have advantages. Your universe has heroes in numbers mine never did. You have magic, cosmic entities, resources I can barely comprehend. And most importantly, you have something my Imperium lost: hope. The genuine belief that threats can be overcome without sacrificing your principles. Can they? Natasha's voice was quiet but sharp. Or are we just naive? I do not know. The Emperor's honesty was stark. That is what I wish to discover. If your way proves sufficient, then I have been wrong for 40 millennia. If it proves insufficient... He didn't finish the sentence. Tony broke the tension. Okay, so here's what I'm hearing. Space Dad here has issues, but he's also our best source of intel on interdimensional nasties that want to eat our reality. We need him, he needs us, and trust is going to be earned through action. Does that about sum it up? Despite the gravity of the situation, several people in the room smiled at the Space Dad comment. Even the Emperor's lips twitched fractionally. An adequate summary, the Emperor said. I propose a formal alliance. I will share my knowledge of warp entities, help fortify your defenses, and fight alongside your heroes when incursions occur. In exchange, you teach me about this universe's powers and allow me to observe how your methods of heroism function in practice. Strange spoke up. And if we find your methods too extreme? If you cross a line we're not willing to cross? Then we will have that confrontation when it comes. I will not pretend to submit to authority I do not recognize, but neither will I assume automatic supremacy. The Emperor looked around the room, meeting each hero's eyes in turn. I propose we begin as allies and see where experience leads us. There was a long moment of silence. Then Steve stood and extended his hand. I've fought alongside people I didn't trust before. Sometimes they became my closest friends. Sometimes they remained threats I had to watch. Let's see which one you turn out to be, Emperor. The Emperor grasped Steve's hand. The super soldier's enhanced strength was formidable by human standards, but the Emperor's grip made it clear who was physically stronger. Yet the handshake was measured, respectful. One by one, others in the room stood and offered their own acceptance. Not Thor. He was still watching with Asgardian wariness. Not Fury. The spy master trusted no one fully. But enough agreed that an alliance was forged. As the meeting began to break up, Strange approached the Emperor quietly. There's something else, isn't there? Something you haven't told them. The Emperor's expression grew grave. Yes, the dimensional barriers are not just weakened, they are actively being torn open from the other side. Something in the warp has taken notice of this universe, something vast and malevolent. I felt it during the battle, reaching across the void between realities. How long do we have? Weeks, perhaps a month before the next major incursion. The Emperor looked out over the city. And when it comes, Stephen Strange, it will make the demon we faced seem insignificant by comparison. The Chaos Gods are patient, but once they commit to a target, they are relentless. Strange felt ice form in his stomach. Then we need to be ready. Yes, because ready or not, the forces of chaos are coming, and they will test whether your heroism is strength or weakness. 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation that transformed Earth's hero community into something resembling a unified military force. The Emperor had not been idle. Working with Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, he'd helped design new detection systems that could identify dimensional breaches hours before manifestation rather than minutes. With Dr. Strange and the sorcerers of Kamartaj, he'd reinforced the mystical barriers around major population centers. With Charles Xavier, he'd established a psychic early warning network that spanned the globe, linking telepaths who could sense warp corruption before it took physical form. But it wasn't enough. The signs were unmistakable to those who knew what to watch for. Reality was thinning. Strange had reported cracks forming in the dimensional barriers, not breaches yet, but fissures that leaked psychic energy into the material world. People were having nightmares of unprecedented vividness. Crime rates spiked as fear and anger became inexplicably amplified. 3 separate riots had erupted in cities across the world for no apparent reason, driven by emotions that spiraled beyond rational control. The warp was bleeding through, and with it came whispers. Now, standing in the rebuilt S.H.I.E.L.D. command center, Nick Fury watched as every alarm system they possessed began screaming in unison. Not one breach this time, 7. Simultaneously manifesting at major cities across the globe: New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, Lagos, and Sydney. "This is it," Fury said quietly. "The big one." The Emperor stood beside him, his expression carved from stone. Not merely an incursion, an invasion. The Chaos Gods have committed resources to claiming this universe. What emerges from those portals will be coordinated, intelligent, and designed to break your spirit as much as your defenses. Maria Hill pulled up tactical displays. "We've got Avengers teams mobilizing to each location. Strange is coordinating sorcerer support. Xavier has his telepaths dampening panic. Wakanda is deploying their forces to Lagos. But Emperor," she turned to face him directly, "we need to know. Can we win this?" The Emperor was silent for 3 heartbeats. "I do not know. In my universe, battles against chaos are never truly won, only survived. But your universe has advantages mine never possessed. We will know the answer soon enough." "Not exactly inspiring," Fury muttered. "I do not deal in false inspiration, only honest assessment." The Emperor's eyes blazed with golden light. "But know this, I have fought the ruinous powers for 10,000 years and never yielded. I do not intend to start now." Across the planet, portals screamed open. From the breach over New York emerged creatures that defied sanity. Lesser demons poured through first, twisted things that had once been emotions given form, now shaped by malevolent will into instruments of corruption. Behind them came greater entities, bloodletters of Corne wielding hellblades that burned with rage made manifest. Plague-bearers of Nurgle that spread disease with every step. Demonettes of Slaanesh, whose beauty was a weapon that drove mortals to madness. Pink horrors of Tzeentch that split into blue horrors when struck, laughing at the futility of violence. Iron Man led the New York defense, his suit upgraded with Emperor-designed shielding that provided limited protection against psychic assault. Captain America coordinated ground forces, his shield already covered in ichor from entities that should not bleed. Thor called down lightning that sent demons screaming back into the warp, but for every one destroyed, 2 more pushed through. The Emperor stood in the center of the maelstrom, a pillar of golden fire that pushed back the tide of corruption. His psychic presence was a fortress, a bulwark that the demons broke against like waves on an unyielding shore. When he struck, demons didn't just die, they were unmade, their essence scattered so thoroughly that reforming would take centuries even in the warp. But even the Emperor could only be in one place. In London, Dr. Strange wove spells of banishment while Wong and the European sorcerers maintained protective circles around civilians. The demons here were different, more cunning, more patient. They tested the defenses, probed for weaknesses, and when they found none, they simply waited, corrupting the environment around them with their presence. In Tokyo, the X-Men faced horrors that attacked the mind as much as the body. Jean Grey's telekinesis carved through demonic flesh, while Scott's optic blasts punched holes in the larger entities. But Cyclops could feel it, the insidious whisper at the edge of his thoughts, promising power, offering to make him stronger if he would just embrace the rage burning in his chest. "Scott," Jean's voice cut through the whispers. "It's Korn. He's trying to corrupt you through your anger. Focus on control, not destruction." Scott gritted his teeth and adjusted his visor, narrowing the beam to surgical precision rather than overwhelming force. The whispers receded, balked by his discipline. In Mumbai, Black Panther coordinated with local heroes, his vibranium claws tearing through demonic manifestations. But the sheer number was overwhelming. For every daemon killed, the breach disgorged more, an endless tide that threatened to drown the defenders through attrition alone. Back in New York, Tony's HUD flashed warnings as his armor's power reserves dropped below 50%. "Jay, tell me you've got good news." "I'm afraid not, sir. Current projections indicate that at this rate of consumption, we will be overrun within 47 minutes. Then we need to close the portals." Tony blasted a bloodletter that had gotten too close to a group of civilians. "Emperor, any brilliant ideas on how to shut these things down?" The Emperor's voice resonated in every defender's mind simultaneously, a psychic conference call that bypassed all communication barriers. "The breaches are being held open from the warp side. We cannot close them from here. Someone must enter the breach and destroy the anchors maintaining the portals." "That's a suicide mission," Steve said, his voice strained as he threw his shield through 3 demons in sequence. "Anyone who goes through would be trapped in the warp, with no way back." "Not necessarily. I can maintain a psychic tether to anyone who enters." "But the environment will be hostile beyond your comprehension. Madness, corruption, and death await any mortal who sets foot in that realm." "Then we send someone who's not exactly mortal." Bruce Banner, who had been holding back until now, felt the familiar rage building. But this time, instead of fighting it, he embraced it with purpose. "Hulk, smash portal." The transformation was immediate and violent. Hulk roared his challenge and leaped toward the New York breach, the Emperor's golden tether wrapping around him like a lifeline. The green giant crashed through the dimensional barrier and vanished into the roiling chaos beyond. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then the breach began to shrink. Thor saw what Banner had done and made his decision. For Asgard and Midgard, he flew into the London breach, Mjolnir blazing with lightning. In Tokyo, Jean Grey looked at Scott. "I can do this. My telekinesis will protect me, and my telepathy can follow the Emperor's tether back." "John, no. We don't have a choice, Scott. I love you." And she was gone, diving into the portal before he could stop her. One by one, heroes made the impossible choice. Black Panther in Mumbai. Captain Marvel, who had arrived from space, took São Paulo. War Machine volunteered for Lagos. Vision, whose android nature made him resistant to warp corruption, entered Sydney. The Emperor stood at the center of New York, his consciousness stretched across 7-dimensional breaches, maintaining psychic tethers to 7 heroes who were voluntarily entering Hell to save their world. The strain was immense. Even his vast power was being pushed to its limits. In the warp, Hulk found the anchor, a massive structure of crystallized screams and solidified hatred, maintained by a greater demon of Korn. The daemon was 30 feet tall, all rage and brass and bloodlust made manifest. Hulk hit it like a meteor. The fight was savage, primal, and brief. The demon was powerful, ancient, and fueled by eons of warfare. But Hulk was angrier. When his fists finally pulverized the anchor, the demon screamed in frustration as its portal collapsed, cutting off the invasion force. Thor's battle was different, a contest of wills as much as strength, fighting a Tzeentchian horror that kept changing form and bending reality. But the god of thunder had faced Surtur and lived. He would not be unmade by parlor tricks. Mjolnir shattered the anchor, and Thor rode the lightning back through the Emperor's tether. John Grey fought with pure psionic force, her mind a blade cutting through the whispers and temptations. The Slaaneshi demon guarding her anchor promised pleasure beyond imagining if she would only stop, only listen, only give in. She answered with a telekinetic pulse that reduced the demon to its component atoms. One by one, the portals collapsed. One by one, the heroes returned, dragged back through the Emperor's tethers, some unconscious, all bearing scars, both physical and mental. But they had succeeded. The invasion was over. But as the last portal sealed, the Emperor's expression grew grim. Because in the final moments before the breach closed, he had felt something looking back at him from the warp, something vast, something aware, something that had just learned this new universe existed and found it appetizing. The Chaos Gods had noticed Earth, and they would return. The aftermath of the invasion took weeks to process, and the scars would take far longer to heal. 37,000 casualties across 7 cities, buildings reduced to rubble, entire city blocks corrupted by warp energy that would take Strange and his sorcerers months to cleanse. The psychological trauma alone would require years of therapy for millions who had witnessed horrors that defied rational explanation. But Earth had survived, barely but definitively. The Emperor stood on the balcony of Avengers Tower, looking out over a scarred but standing New York City. Behind him, the heroes who had entered the warp were recovering. Physically, they were healing quickly, but the mental and spiritual wounds would take longer. Hulk had reverted to Bruce Banner and slept for 3 days straight. Jean Grey woke screaming from nightmares of whispers that promised her everything she'd ever wanted. Thor had retreated to Asgard briefly to undergo spiritual cleansing rituals. They had been changed by what they'd seen. All of them had. Tony Stark joined the Emperor on the balcony, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. He offered one to the golden figure, who took it with a nod of acknowledgement. "So," Tony said after a long sip, "that was fun. Let's never do it again." "We will have to." The Emperor's voice was heavy with certainty. This was merely a probing attack. The Chaos Gods are testing your defenses, learning your capabilities. The next assault will be larger, more coordinated, specifically designed to exploit the weaknesses they identified. "Yeah, I got that impression." Tony drained half his glass. "Strange estimates it'll take 6 months to fully repair the dimensional barriers, maybe longer. And even then, they'll never be as strong as they were before you arrived." "I know. I am sorry for that." Tony glanced at him in surprise. "Did the God Emperor of mankind just apologize? I am not a god." And yes, the Emperor's gaze remained fixed on the city. "I did not choose to come here, but my arrival has brought catastrophe to your world. Your people have died because of dimensional wounds I inadvertently created. An apology is inadequate, but it is honest." "Huh." Tony considered this. "You know, 3 weeks ago I wasn't sure if you were going to try to conquer us. Now you're actually showing something like humility. Character growth. I approve. Your heroes have taught me much, Anthony Stark." The Emperor finally turned to face him. "In my universe, I led through absolute authority. My word was law, my will unquestionable, and it bred resentment, rebellion, and ultimately civil war. Here, I watch you coordinate with beings as powerful as gods, negotiate with those who could refuse you, and achieve victory through cooperation rather than domination. It is instructive. So what you're saying is, we're rubbing off on you." Tony's smile was tired but genuine. Does that mean you're giving up the whole emperor thing? No. I am what I am, a being of immense age and power who has guided humanity's evolution for 40 millennia. But perhaps I can be that without demanding worship or absolute obedience. The Emperor's expression shifted to something that might have been hope. Your Captain Rogers said something during the battle that resonated with me. He said, "We don't trade lives." That a single death is a tragedy, regardless of the strategic benefit. In my universe, I sacrificed millions to save billions. Necessary, but I wonder if there might have been another way. Probably not, Tony said honestly. Sometimes the math is brutal and the choices are impossible, but the fact that you're questioning it, that you're willing to consider there might have been alternatives, that's what makes the difference between a hero and a tyrant. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Am I a hero then? Jury's still out, but you stood with us when it mattered. You didn't try to take control or override our decisions. You gave us intel, shared your power, and trusted us to do our jobs. That's a good start. Behind them, the balcony door opened and Steve Rogers stepped out, his uniform still bearing scorch marks from the battle. Emperor, Tony, we're convening a debrief in an hour. Fury wants all team leaders present, including you. He nodded to the Emperor. I will attend. The Emperor straightened. Captain Rogers, a moment. I wish to speak with you. Steve raised an eyebrow but nodded. Tony took the hint and headed inside, leaving the two warriors alone. You fought well, the Emperor said. Your tactical coordination kept casualties far lower than they should have been given the scale of the assault. Thank you, but that's not what you wanted to talk about. No. The Emperor's gaze was penetrating. You are the moral center of this group. The others look to you for ethical guidance, not just tactical leadership. So I ask you directly, do you trust me? Steve considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I trust that you want to protect humanity. I trust that you're genuinely trying to find a better way than the path you walked in your universe. But do I trust you completely? No. You're too willing to sacrifice the few for the many. Too comfortable with authoritarian solutions. Too certain of your own righteousness. A fair assessment. The Emperor's tone held no defensiveness. What would it take to earn your full trust? Time and choices. Steve met his gaze evenly. When the next crisis comes and you have to choose between victory at any cost or victory with acceptable losses, I need to see which way you lean. When someone challenges your authority, I need to see if you listen or if you crush them. When you're offered absolute power to solve a problem, I need to see if you can refuse it. Tests, then. Life is a test, Emperor, and trust is earned through repeated right choices, not grand gestures. Steve's expression softened slightly. But I'm willing to give you the chance to earn it. You've shown more humility and self-awareness in 3 weeks than some people show in a lifetime. That counts for something. The Emperor nodded slowly. Thank you, Captain. Your honesty is refreshing. In my universe, few dared speak to me so directly. In this universe, we speak truth to power. It's kind of our thing. As Steve headed back inside, the Emperor remained on the balcony, his ancient mind processing everything he'd experienced since arriving in this strange new reality. He had fought alongside heroes who trusted each other enough to risk their lives in hell itself. He had witnessed ordinary humans standing against demonic horrors armed with nothing but courage and conviction. He had seen cooperation achieve what tyranny never could. Perhaps his sons had been right to rebel, not in their methods or their allegiance to chaos, but in their fundamental grievance. Perhaps absolute authority was not the answer. Perhaps humanity thrived best when allowed to choose its own path, to make its own mistakes, to forge its own heroes. It was a revolutionary thought for a being who had spent 40,000 years believing he alone knew the path to salvation. The Emperor looked down at his hands, hands that had created wonders and committed atrocities in equal measure. In this universe, he could be something different. Not the distant God Emperor on a golden throne, but something more immediate. An advisor, a teacher, a warrior standing alongside others rather than above them. It would require him to change fundamentally, to relinquish certainty, to accept that he might be wrong. Could he do it? Could the Emperor of mankind, master of the Imperium, the anathema who had fought gods and won, humble himself enough to truly join this universe's defenders as an equal rather than their obvious superior? He didn't know, but for the first time in 10,000 years, he was willing to try. Inside Avengers Tower, the debrief was comprehensive and brutal. Fury pulled no punches in his assessment. They had won, but barely, and only because heroes had been willing to sacrifice themselves in ways that couldn't be repeated indefinitely. "Next time they come," Fury said, his single eye sweeping the assembled heroes, "they'll know our tricks. They'll know our tactics. They'll come prepared to counter everything we threw at them today. Then we adapt," T'Challa said calmly. "Wakanda will commit resources to the Dimensional Defense Project. Our scientists will work with Stark Industries and the Emperor's knowledge to develop better countermeasures. The X-Men will expand the Psychic Warning Network," Xavier added, "and we'll train more telepaths to recognize warp corruption before it manifests. Kamar Taj will dedicate 100 sorcerers to maintaining the dimensional barriers full-time," Strange said. "We'll establish rotating watches, early warning systems, and emergency response protocols." The Emperor listened to them planning, coordinating, adapting. No single authority dictating terms, no emperor issuing commands. Just individuals of immense power and knowledge working together toward a common goal. It was messy, inefficient, prone to disagreement and debate. It was also resilient in ways his Imperium had never been. "I can contribute additional knowledge," the Emperor said. "In my universe, we developed weapons specifically designed to combat warp entities. Null shields that dampen psychic energy, blessed weapons that can permanently destroy lesser demons, anti-chaos training protocols for soldiers who must face such threats." "We'll take all of that," Fury said immediately. "But understand, we're not building an Imperium here. Whatever defenses we create, they're under democratic oversight. No secret armies, no autonomous military forces. No, I know best, so trust me operations." The Emperor felt the instinctive rejection rise within him, the authority figure's reflex to resist limitations on his power. But he forced it down, considering instead what that oversight might prevent. How many of his mistakes had come from acting without counsel? How many disasters had his absolute authority enabled? "Acceptable," he said finally. "I will submit to your oversight, with one condition. In moments of immediate crisis, when seconds matter, tactical decisions must be made by those with the experience to make them. I will not watch you debate while people die." "Fair," Steve said before Fury could object. "In the field, mission commanders have tactical authority. That's already our protocol. But strategic planning and resource deployment go through proper channels." The Emperor nodded. It was a compromise, not what he would have chosen in his prime, but perhaps what he needed now. As the meeting continued, he found himself studying these heroes with new appreciation. They were flawed, certainly, prone to disagreement and doubt, but they were also capable of extraordinary courage, genuine sacrifice, and a kind of hope his Imperium had lost millennia ago. Maybe, just maybe, they could teach him to be something other than an emperor. Maybe they could teach him to be a hero, 6 months after the Emperor of Mankind's arrival, Earth had fundamentally changed. The dimensional barriers were stronger now, reinforced by a combination of imperial science, Wakandan technology, and mystical wards from every magical tradition on the planet. The psychic warning network Xavier had established could detect warp disturbances hours before manifestation, giving defenders time to evacuate civilians and prepare responses. Specialized units trained in anti-demon tactics operated in every major city, equipped with weapons designed from the Emperor's knowledge and built with Stark's manufacturing prowess. The Emperor himself had become a fixture at Avengers Tower, though he maintained his own residence, a modest facility by his standards, palatial by anyone else's. He trained heroes in psychic defense, shared tactical knowledge from 40 millennia of warfare, and stood ready to respond to threats when they emerged. 3 more minor incursions had been repelled with minimal casualties, each one handled more efficiently than the last. But more importantly, he had changed. The being who had arrived wielding absolute certainty and ancient authority now attended strategy meetings where his proposals were debated and sometimes rejected. He had learned to say, "I don't know," when asked questions outside his experience. He had even laughed, a rusty, unpracticed sound, at one of Tony Stark's jokes during a particularly stressful planning session. The heroes had changed too. They carried themselves differently now, aware that their universe was no longer isolated, that threats existed on scales they had barely imagined. But instead of fear, that knowledge had forged unity. Former rivals coordinated seamlessly, long-standing conflicts had been set aside. Earth's heroes had looked into the abyss of chaos and decided, collectively, that they would not let it claim their world. The Emperor stood once more on the Avengers Tower balcony, but this time he was not alone. Thor stood beside him, both warriors watching the sunset paint New York's skyline in gold and crimson. "You have adapted well to this realm," Thor said. "My father still counsels caution, but even Odin acknowledges you have proven yourself a defender rather than a conqueror." "High praise from the All-Father." The Emperor's tone was wry. "Though I suspect he still keeps Asgard's weapons ready, should I prove false." "As you would in his place," Thor smiled. "That is wisdom, not insult." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Thor spoke again. "You said once that you sought to learn if there was another path. Have you found your answer?" The Emperor considered the question carefully. "I am beginning to. In my universe, I believed unity required uniformity, that strength came from absolute authority. Here I see diversity creating resilience, freedom breeding innovation, cooperation achieving what domination never could." He paused. "It is not an easy lesson for one who has ruled as I have. The best lessons never are." Inside the tower, the other heroes were gathering for what had become a weekly ritual, a combined team dinner where Avengers, X-Men, sorcerers, and international heroes shared food and stories. It was Tony's idea, a deliberate effort to maintain the connections forged during crisis. The Emperor had been invited, as he was every week, and every week he attended. As he and Thor turned to go inside, a priority alert flashed across their communicators. Not an invasion. Those triggered different alarms now. This was something else, a deep space anomaly detected by S.H.I.E.L.'s orbital sensors. Within minutes, the team was assembled in the operations center. Maria Hill pulled up the data, her expression puzzled. "We're picking up a massive energy signature approaching from outside the solar system. It's not warp-based, not matching any known alien signature. ETA, 3 hours. The Emperor's eyes narrowed as he studied the readings. "This is not from my universe. The energy pattern is distinctly of this reality." "Then what is it?" Steve asked. Before anyone could answer, the signature resolved itself into something visible on the monitors, a massive ship, sleek and ominous, bearing markings that made Thor stiffen in recognition. Thanos, the god of thunder, breathed. The mad titan comes to Earth. The Emperor turned to face the assembled heroes, his expression carved from stone. Then we shall meet him, together. Around the room, heroes straightened, weapons were readied, and powers flared to life. They had faced the forces of chaos and survived. They had looked into hell itself and returned. They had learned to fight as one despite their differences. Whatever this Thanos brought, they would face it as they had faced everything else, united, determined, and absolutely refusing to surrender their world to tyranny of any kind. The Emperor of mankind, who had once ruled 1,000,000 worlds through conquest and authority, now stood shoulder to shoulder with heroes who had chosen cooperation over domination. And as he looked at their faces, resolute, courageous, ready to defend their home at any cost, he finally understood what his Imperium had lost. Not power, not order, not even unity, but hope. The kind of hope that could not be commanded, only earned. The kind that made ordinary beings stand against impossible odds. The kind that had just taught a 40,000-year-old emperor that he still had much to learn. The storm was coming, but Earth was ready, and the Emperor of mankind would stand with its defenders, not as their ruler, but as their ally. That, perhaps, was his true redemption. May the Force be with you. More stories await.